Now recognizes the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Butterfield, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As many of my colleagues know, I spent 30 years in a courtroom, one half of those as a judge, including 2 years on the North Carolina Supreme Court. I have taken particular interest in House Resolution 676. I've spent considerable time researching the standing of the House to initiate litigation against the President or department heads or federal agencies to seek, quote, appropriate relief for failure to act in a manner consistent with the duties of the executive branch, end of quote. Never before, Mr. Speaker, in the history of the Congress has there been institutional litigation between two co-equal branches of government. Never. There have been prior cases involving individual members of Congress who have alleged that their vote had been nullified by presidential action, but none of them succeeded. This bill will clearly authorize institutional litigation between the legislative and executive branches. Unprecedented, Mr. Speaker. The Republicans have chosen to proceed with a one-chamber resolution. The Affordable Care Act, I remind you, was a two-chamber enactment. The House, as an institution, as a subset of the Congress, cannot, Mr. Speaker, cannot by itself enforce a legislative enactment. It must be bicameral. This misguided and politically motivated resolution will establish a precedent that is unknown in our jurisprudence. It is an abuse of power on the part of House Republicans. If this bill passes and this Republican-controlled House initiates a lawsuit without Senate authorization, it will threaten the separation of powers principle and the checks and balances that we have long cherished in our country. I ask my colleagues, do you want the judiciary to become the arbiter of disputes between the Congress and the President? Do you really want to cede to the courts the authority to resolve disputes between the branches? If you set this precedent, then in the future the House or the Senate, acting alone, could simply allege a constitutional violation against the President and get its day in court. Well, what happens if a president is unhappy with the House or with the Senate? Could she just allege a constitutional violation and have the courts settle the dispute? If this precedent is established, will the House be able to sue the Senate or the Senate sue the House? Where does this end? I call on my Republican friends to talk to objective legal scholars and read the literature and prior court decisions, protect the integrity of our federal system, and reject this resolution. Finally, I ask the proponents of this legislation to tell me two things. Tell me what relief you are asking the court to impose. I suppose your answer would be, well, we want the court to tell President Obama that he lacked authority to extend the employer mandate. Why are you upset about that? I thought you didn't like the employer mandate. Well, tell me, how do you plan to pay for this frivolous litigation? Under this resolution, Mr. Speaker, the Speaker of the House will have unbridled discretion to pay legal costs and expert costs. I did not know that the House of Representatives has the authority to pass a bill that will require unbudgeted spending that will add to the deficit that you constantly bemoan. How much will this litigation cost the taxpayers? Mr. Speaker, this is a very sad day in this House. I know what you're doing. The American people know what you're doing. You're using this legislation in your constant effort to discredit President Obama and set the stage for a despicable impeachment proceeding should you hold the majority in the House and gain the majority in the Senate. Shame on House Republicans. Shame on you for this type of politics. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back.